This is the 8-9 combo. I'm Brett McKay. This is Harry Jones. And, mate, how good to have Test Rugby back on our screens properly.
How's it, Brett? It is spectacular like nothing else. I was thinking a couple of years ago when I approached you, hat in hand, a wee lonely beggar from the hinterworlds of rugby, and said, "Please, sir, could I part with you?" And you said, "Mate, you only have 200 followers. Get out of here." And so I said I dedicated my life to the self-aggrandizing pursuit of getting almost 8,000 followers. I'm on the door. And it turned out along the way, I did terrible things. I was in cold plunges. I was upside down. I was shamelessly cavorting with models around the world. I had photographers follow me. It turned out all I needed to do to get 3 million views of a post, 3.1 million views of a post, was just to put Darcy Graham doing his Scottish impression of a lackerback, swivel hips and unnecessarily scrum capped. And he does this weird move on the touchline where he almost grazes the ball and then misses it and shins it and then scores a try. And that this weekend got me 3.1 million views. I just wanted to make you proud of me. Yeah.
No, I'm very proud of you, mate. And look, you know how much our audience has grown. I think I've gained 50 followers since then. So it's been all very good. Incredible clip that was, Darcy Graham, and we're just going to ignore the knock on, aren't we?
There's moments like that, though. I mean, I got so many people who are not in rugby union saying, "What an interesting sport," because there was so many things going on in one play. And
a lot going on.
In our test matches, no matter what it was, there's just it's like every one of them is a whole different novel. It's and you can argue, as you saw online, you just took Maro Itoje's thing, which you'll probably talk about more.
I hadn't seen that.
And 1,000 people want to debate you about finer points. Yeah.
Arguing as to which actual foul play might be it too. It's episode 39 of the 8-9 Combo Rugby podcast. Let's get into the rugby week once again with our cheers and jeers from the weekend. Cheer me, my good friend.
Cheers to a man who came off the bench to do a job. In Cape Town, Damien McKenzie had a relatively simple kick to put the All Blacks out in front. It might not have worked. We would have pulled them back in, I'm sure, and scored. But it still was one of those kicks where he would think, "Oh man, that might linger with me." And so there he had a moment, and there came the man. An incredibly difficult, as you pointed out in your wonderful series of actual, creative, thoughtful tweets that you put out. In contrast to my "Here's Darcy Graham," he had to nail a conversion that he probably did know or think at that moment was for everything. So that's different. Yeah. The worst place to take it from, and a crowd that was having no part of respect the kicker, and he flushed it. He took it farther back from the 22 to avoid the Colby, and just powered it through. Yeah. It always looked like going over, even though it had to do a little bit of a draw. But that thing was worth a cheer.
Really, really good kick. No, that's a good cheer. I like that one. Jeers, on the other hand. There I was just watching the Dallas-Houston NBA game one morning late last week, and in a completely unexpected throwback to the Rugby World Cup final, who did I suddenly see looking back at me in a shot of the Rockets bench? The hairy man.
I was in the bench.
What were you doing? You were like 2 rows from the bench.
I was inside. I could literally hear Steven Adams talking about every part of his body, because he was doing the massage hammer, he was doing the bike, he's every part of his body at this point about to break down. And fantastic. When you were that close to the NBA, the athleticism on display is insane. And as a rugby brain, you kept thinking, "Oh, that guy would be really good as a..."
He'd be a good lock. 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 He'd be a good lock.
Yeah, and the point guards, maybe they'd play some, number 9.
Yeah, we'll find them somewhere. The Northern Spring Autumn Series Tour thing is officially underway with a couple of contrasting tests at Twickenham and Murrayfield over the weekend, and we have got a wonderful returning guest to help get through it all right next. To which we add him to the stage. It's wonderful to hand out another 8-9 combo debut to a guest that we've loved speaking to over the last couple of years. He was front and centre at Twickers on Saturday as the All Blacks edged England by just 2. And he is, of course, the Guardian's rugby correspondent, respected author. And suddenly we've just found out a new music critic for the Guardian as well. He's the author of Around the World in 80 Minutes in Search of Rugby Greatness. Please welcome to the 8-9 combo, Rob Kitson. Hello, Rob. Welcome back. Great to have you.
Nice to be here. I'm not sure about that introduction. I think, yes, it was a moonlighting opportunity. We had a bit of a job swap in the Guardian, and the sports guys, the hacks, we swapped over with the arts and music people. And let's just say, I'm not sure they'll be inviting me back, but yeah, it was fun. It was fun for a one-off. You know, I could indulge myself, and as I say, I'm not sure they want to make a habit of it. But anyway, there we go.
In the grand pecking order of sports writers, you know, where did rugby, cricket, football sort of finish? You know, who got the really bad bunch out of this?
Well, I did phone them up. I said, look, you know, I'm not your ballet opera sort of expert, to be perfectly honest. Please save me from myself here, because otherwise we're stuck. So they did send me. I think they saw their opportunity though, so they sent me down to see somebody called Becky Hill, who I know you've got all her albums.
I do not. Sorry.
No, well, you see, this is it. You see, this is where us music critics, we're a bit ahead of you. You see, we know about this sort of stuff.
He's putting on airs already. One review in.
I love it.
I won't ruin the surprise. But if you want to click on the Guardian, which is free to all online for anybody who wants to have a look, you might be quite amused. But anyway, I'll leave that there.
We will do. We will absolutely point people to it through our socials. It was a fantastic way to open up the November international season at Twickenham on Saturday. 24-22 New Zealand get up. It's a heartbreaking loss for England, and they had plenty of chances to win that, and there was probably even suitable analysis and hot takes saying that they maybe should have been closer than they probably should have been in that game. But holy hell, what a game to kick off November.
I think actually it was interesting. It was a great occasion, because sometimes Twickenham, it's a bit big, and they've tried all sorts of things to get the atmosphere a bit better, and to different sorts of music. I'm going on about music again, but they did actually get it right, I think, or much nearer to right. It's all subjective, clearly, but it was a great atmosphere, and obviously a really exciting game. You'd probably say it was a bit of a flawed classic, but you couldn't argue with agree with what you say about Damien McKenzie's final conversion. What a kick! Yeah. What a kick! And to be honest, New Zealand, they really, for a lot of the time, they were well below the standards of great New Zealand sides. They dropped an awful lot of ball. They turned a lot of. They did,
yeah.
Penalties all over the show, but they still come back and they still score. A really good try. Down at the end, they kick the goal, and then somehow or another they come away with a win. So yeah, you have to take your hat off to them.
Yeah, Rob, in your article this morning, you wrote about composure and that final 2 minutes. And it's interesting to me because the whole game had flip-arounds like that. I thought England stayed in the contest because of composure. I thought they didn't get ahead of themselves. They didn't worry too much, and so they were the ones that were not dropping the ball at critical moments as much, and it was New Zealand that I thought was a bit hair on fire. Then you bring on Damien McKenzie, and he calms things down, and George Ford comes on, and it's all hectic. And I go, this doesn't make sense to me.
Someone's flipped a switch somewhere. Yeah,
I think it was a bit odd in that sense, because the logical thought is that maybe George Ford is an experienced player, and by the way, nobody's pointing the finger at him alone. You have to win rugby matches. It's not necessarily about the goal kick. We all know that, but you would have normally said, oh well, yes, he'll calm things down, but actually I think the game's changing a little bit. I did some digging into the stats. England, that Marcus Smith kicked a penalty before he went off, and that's the only 3 points they've scored in the last half hour of their last 3 tests against New Zealand. So the 90 minutes they've had, last 3 half hours, they've scored precisely 3 points. Now, if you're saying to me, well, they look calm and composed, well, they might have done, but they're not scoring any points, and that's the point of literally the point of the game. So, I think England have got an issue when it comes to closing out big games now, you can then have a debate about why that is. But I think the evidence is stacking up, to be honest.
Well, both teams came in with that color around them, as Brett and I well know. That All Blacks have been criticized because their final quarters have been insipid.
There's an absolute irony about this, Rob. So the 10 points that the All Blacks scored in the last 20 minutes was the first points they'd scored in 4 or 5 games. It might be more than that. It was throughout the Rugby Championship.
It's like these two teams need each other to be able to score in the final quarter.
To face the music, dare I say it.
And maybe there's a thing there that actually all these replacements and substitutes coming on, it's very difficult to make that complete transition in a lot of cases. Certainly, maybe 1 or 2 here and there. People are injured, obviously. But it might be that there's a wider thing here. But certainly in England's case, they were fine. They were fine. They were 8 points up. They were in control of the game. The halfbacks were really playing well. They weren't obviously fatigued. And so there's a big debate, or will be a big debate about this week, about pre-arranged replacements, preset. Well, you've got, this is what we're going to do in the 62nd minute, and whether actually you should be looking up, heads up rugby, if you like, looking up, going, well, actually, he looks fine to me. We're 8 points. Let's keep going. Why would you change? Why would you, change it now? So, it's one of those debates that you can have down the pub forever and ever. But this week it's quite interesting.
It was a debate that we had minutes after full time. In fact, we wondered exactly the same thing in our post-mortem, that, like Marcus Smith was the spark in attack. And even if you want to bring George Ford on to be the closing guy, the point I think we both made, Harry, was that I think you still need to find a spot on the field for Marcus Smith in those moments.
Because he was kicking tactically really well. His diagonals were finding the ground. He was 6 for 6 off the tee, and there's something about that appeals. I mean, everyone focused on the drop goal. That wasn't really Ford's fault.
He did shank 2 drop goals though. Yes,
but off the tee, you felt like he would have made that relatively makeable shot, and instead you're putting on someone cold and saying make a kick. So there's some thought behind that. The box that have been using, the Springboks have been using the bench to great effect. It's all situational. It literally, if you tried to put a pattern chart, you couldn't. The coaches are using GPS, they're using battle stats, and they're using gut. And in other sports like the NBA, where the decision when to put someone in and out is huge, because it's the coach's final prerogative. I feel like it did look like Will Stewart came off before he was done with his work. It did feel like Marcus Smith was still wanting to beat New Zealand. I didn't understand the process behind it. I mean, I'm fine with it. It just didn't seem like it had, Rob, it didn't have a context in this game.
We said it on Sunday. It felt prescribed. That's what it felt like.
Well, and then you look back, you go, well, hang on, what's the pattern there? And of course, you see the pattern that they now take Jamie George, who's the captain, off. They take him off, around 50 minutes, 48 minutes around there. So that's a long time to be out without your captain and the guy who guides the ship around. Of course, there've been successful sides, back in the day, but I think in England got a pretty young side. And so you're sort of lacking that. And then, I also think it comes back to a positional thing. You've got to back your number 10. If he's still a young guy, you've got to show faith. If he's your number 1 guy, you've got to show faith in him, I think, in a playmaking position. It's not, we're back into the realms of Ronan O'Gara, perhaps, who always had that big rivalry, didn't he, with, Johnny Sexton or David Humphreys back in the day for Ireland. There is a bit of healthy competition. I think helps you on the training pitch. I'm not sure on match day. I think you've got to go, for better or worse, you've really got to go for the guy, particularly if they're young and fit and enthusiastic. You've got to pin your colours to one of those masks.
I think especially if England's trying to win a game, and let's be clear about this, they were the one that they had their foot on the ball off the tee to win the game, and New Zealand had to watch and see whether they won or lost. If you're trying to win that sort of game, I think continuity at 10 is crucial, because whatever is working for your exit, your entry, your around the park stuff, it was humming. And the minute you stick Randall and Ford back in there, suddenly everyone's having to readjust. There's just a different nuance where he sits in the pocket. Do you think that they still England's been doing this for what now? 10 years. Farrell, Ford, Smith. When will someone just declare this is our guy?
Yeah, and I think it's central to some of the. I mean, they clearly Owen Farrell was the guy. He was captain for a long time, but then they moved him to centre. So they could get him and Ford in, and you muddy the waters a little bit that way. I mean, I think in this case, Ford, bless him, he hadn't played since the end of September. Hadn't kicked a goal. I mean, he's been out injured. So suddenly the guys you've got on the field are Ford and Henry Slade, neither of whom have played any rugby at all, basically all season.
Had Ford not played a club at all before?
No, end of 28th of September he last played. So what are we now? First week of November. So he hadn't played for 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah. Right.
And then I mean, of course he's experienced, but I mean, and the irony, there's all sorts of ironies. We all know George Ford, all those drop goals he kicked against Argentina in the World Cup. We know he can kick a drop goal. But then, of course, on Saturday, who do they wheel on, to walk around the pitch at half time? But the England 2003 World Cup winning squad, Johnny Wilkinson, and you're going, of all the days. So, I mean, there was, some sod's law applies, as we say in England, more often than not. But I don't know. I think you can overanalyze it, but I think in the end, you need a little clarity. And sure, there's a bit of luck. Yes, the ball bounced off the goalpost, and had it gone the other way, we're having a different conversation. We all know that. And we also, just one thing to add in here, actually, is that what was the try count? New Zealand scored 3 tries.
Three tries to one. Yeah. And
with an interception. And England's try was an interception. New Zealand could easily have scored a couple more. They butchered at least a couple more tries. So, it depends which way you want to look at it. But I think England, yes, they hung in the game. Yes, they were close to winning it in the end, but the more you look at it, the more you go, there's a few things here possibly.
In that regard, is there a fair degree of surprise that the margin was only 2?
Oh no, because it was a great chance for England. It was a massive chance. They should have won the first test, I thought, in Dunedin in July. The second test, they sort of controversial refereeing to sing at the end. They probably could have had a draw quite easily, and so it's all up. They're at home. Okay, they haven't had a warm-up test. New Zealand are pretty match hardened, but you can't use many excuses. They had most of their guys. They were missing Alex Mitchell and Ollie Chesham, who would be the 2 people who would have
certainly missed Mitchell.
Well, I think so, and Chesham actually, who's that sort of all round. They'd have had him in there. Maybe brought Cunningham South on us for a bit more impact. So but you can't make, as I say, after a while the excuses sort of have to fade away. The near misses, the if onlys, all those sorts of things. You have to go, well, hang on a sec. Are we looking at the wrong end of the stick here? We need to go, is there something we need to change here? And I you do look at England's attack, maybe, and you look at those end of game stats, and you look at the bench, and you think, they're in danger of getting the same results here if they just stick to what they're doing.
The three losses, Harry, are 1 point, 7 points, and 2 points.
The matchup,
there's not much in it.
The matchup is good. It's a good matchup for England. I think they can negate, for all the sound and fury of the All Blacks. And you look at some of the 211 passes by the All Blacks, but I mean, England had better meters per carry. Their turnovers came like clockwork. You could just feel them coming. And New Zealand tries were more scored from first phase or moments of brilliance by the admittedly brilliant players. Will Jordan, Mark Saleh is untackleable. Wallace Satiti is a phenom. Geordie played well. Clark. I mean, just going on the list. Artie, even Almua came on and was a barnstormer. But England soaked it up. It was actually, to me, the right game plan. It's just that there was this kind of prescriptive, formal approach to the bench again. And I also wondered a little bit about, why aren't they putting people like Imani in space more? Because he seemed untackleable as well. There's something about the English attack to me, Rob, that just seems stilted a little bit of, you got a guy beating 6 defenders, 2 clean breaks. He just looks slippery and slidey, but get him more touches. 9 carries, not enough.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, absolutely right. A soak it up team. You want your side to be able to soak up pressure, and I think they are. You're right. They're good at that. Maro Itoje is excellent at that. These are
played well.
He's one of the best at that. Your Tom Currys of this world. They're not going backwards. They'll keep coming at you. So that's great. I just think, you're absolutely right about Manny Fairweather. I love that try that New Zealand scored, the little switch move, Bowden Barrett to Will Jordan coming through that little bit of a draft off the back, the angles and what have you. I think that's still something that England could add to their game. Something like that. Those sort of angles are running. That just precision they haven't got yet for me. And you can say they're still young, they're still inexperienced, but suddenly Borthwick's been in charge for some time, and then you get onto the sort of churn of assistant coaches that they've had. They've lost the defence coach in the summer. They lost the S&C guy who was the sort of Alan Walters is a fantastic guy, really energy giver to the squad. So there's been all sorts of comings and goings, and I think if you're being, it's not too short a jump, is it, to go from all that sort of upheaval off the field and suddenly you're a bit behind where you want to be, come the big game.
Yeah. Is there, and we'll get on to what's coming this weekend. Is there a bit of pressure on England now that they really should put Australia away this weekend?
Well, it makes it a really interesting game, doesn't it? Because I think when England started, we all thought, well, blimey, they're going to struggle maybe to beat South Africa with the depth of squad that they've got at the moment. They've got a real good shot against the All Blacks. But they should definitely be putting Australia away at Twickenham and Japan as well. So if they were to lose suddenly to Australia at Twickenham, and suddenly the world champions are coming their way the following week, then I think there's all sorts of bells going off and sirens and all that sort of thing.
No doubt. Do go back and find our Test match postmortem from England and New Zealand that was recorded in the early hours of my Sunday morning, but the minutes after full time, it was a really good way to go back and look at it. The big surprising postscript, I think, to the game, Rob, was Joe Marler's decision to retire from international rugby, and he'd had a week, hadn't he?
Well, I think I think they all went on this warm weather training trip to Spain. Which, off he went. He got picked for. He said yes, put his hand up, said yes, I can go. I think he got there and realised that he wasn't. He was down the pecking order a bit. He's played all these tests. He's a big family man. He's had well publicised sort of issues, mental health, being away from home, all the rest of it. He's got other things going on in his life. So you could say, the timing wasn't ideal, was it? And then of course, so whether they got home and he puts his kit bag, lobs out in the corner, gets his phone out and says, oh gosh, well, I'm not going to be in New Zealand, facing New Zealand at the weekend. I'll tell you what, I still want to have a word about the Haka, and so off it all goes. And you go, I don't know, there's a large chunk of me that, if you didn't have to write about the Haka in the week before an England-New Zealand game, it would be a blessed relief, wouldn't it, really?
You are a music critic now, so you could just
I suppose
double column.
Interpretive dance. I mean, listen, the Haka is everybody's aware, or should be aware, that it's a sign of respect and what it all means in Maori culture, and it's not just about sort of 15 guys stamping their feet on the field at Twickenham, and we all know that. But then there comes the sort of issues of whether it's overly choreographed these days. What are we? What's
the appropriate response? Hang on,
is it for PR? Are we genuinely sincere? Is it all about the soul of what have you? Are there other things being tacked onto the side of it? And I think that's. I mean, again, it depends where you sit on that particular thing. Joe is fully entitled to have an opinion. I don't think it was the best week or moment to express that opinion in the way he did, because it obviously came back to the All Blacks. They came pretty hard, didn't they? Scott Barrett said he'd loaded the gun, I think was the phrase.
He certainly had done that.
What do they call it in politics? The third rail. There's certain issues you don't want to touch. To me, debates about Haka have always fallen. It's so difficult to know the correct level of proper disrespect that you have cannot show. I know turning your back, as John Eels said, is the wrong way. And he went on this pilgrimage, and a wonderful documentary to understand the haka that he went and did. Very thoughtful. But then again, you also don't. It's weird in a constant battle for possession game and such an attritional gladiatorial sport that all sides have to just watch another side do that and not know how they can say, well, up yours too. And so it doesn't really fit in the rest of the game ethos. So I kind of understand it, but we've got to get to the point where we can have a discussion about it without one side going, "Oh, you're culturally insensitive." Because then how do you discuss this?
Yeah.
But then we have the spectacle before the game though, where England made their intention very clear by advancing before New Zealand had even started the haka, and then New Zealand in their crescendo came forward as well. And there was a moment where I actually feared for the photographers and the cameramen laying on their stomach because suddenly they had 35 blokes around them and it could have kicked off.
It's fine. It's all fine with photographers. They love all that sort of stuff. They love being trampled on there. That's their normal
true.
modus operandi.
How will Joe Marler be remembered?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, it's quite interesting. If you leave aside the rugby and all the caps, he will be remembered, I think, for making people look at rugby players a little bit differently. You can be who you are as a rugby player, he would say, and I think actually that's quite important. There's a lot of people who think, "Oh, I have to behave this way, or I have to do that, or I have to have this haircut," and he had no truck with all of that. And so actually, that's much to his credit. As I say, he was very open and honest about the mental health issues he's had, and a really strong. I mean, a strong prop forward. We're not talking just one of those guys who hung in there and picked up a few cheap caps. He was a very strong, combative guy. Listen, he was. I'm not sure he ever liked me very much, but that's probably one of those. I remember years ago we went along. He was captain of Harlequins, quite young, and we went along, and he was giving these two other young journos a bit of a hard time and not answering their questions. And I said to him, why? I said, why? Why are you being like this? And he said, well, it's like broccoli, isn't it? I said, so what do you mean broccoli? He said, well, I don't like broccoli. He said, and I've always stuck with me. Whenever I think of Joe Marler, I think of broccoli. If he didn't like it, he'd say so, and so that makes him different. It makes him his own man, and actually, in the end, I think we should all salute that.
I like it that the players can be big characters. I mean, I think we're in a game where our coaches tend to be the larger characters, and Danny Care's new book puts a sharper light on Eddie Jones, who's sometimes cruel. Whereas to me, a guy like Joe Marler is obviously a piss taker. He's a wind-up merchant. He's a guy at the pub. We all know a guy just like Joe Marler. What made it different is he wasn't just like the honey badger. He was one of the best props. At his peak, he was one of the best props in the world. And I think it makes it a whole different story because he was that good.
He had some questionable angles of engagement at times, but yes.
That's part of scrummaging. You find what works.
And we all know prop forwards are some of the most interesting people. I had a long chat with Ellis Genge last week, an incredible guy. And he'd be the first to say that he's sort of matured and come through, a sort of pretty difficult sort of childhood at times, and he's doing a lot for disadvantaged kids down in Bristol. And he was honestly, he's an incredible guy to talk to. Really impressive on a number of subjects, and from a play, he's at the sharp end. He's from a player's point of view, he's really, I don't know, whether it's player welfare, whether it's the shape of the game, whether it's pay for certain players. He was outstanding. We did a piece with him in the paper at the weekend, and I think we underestimate the fact that these players are. I always think you've got to have something about you to play top level rugby. You really do. And it's not just a question of you being able to just very strong or you can pass. You've got to have you've got to be a little bit mad or a little bit different sometimes, I think. And I think we sometimes forget that, and I always try and cling to that and remember that, rather than trying to treat all the players are the same, and you sit in your ivory tower and don't take note of their personality. So I think it's important. I think a healthy sport breeds lots of different personalities.
And he was definitely all of those, Joe Marler. There was something apt about his announcement video. Actually, just in the paddock on his farm, flat cap, anorak. I'm done. I'm a farmer now. So yeah, that was nice. That was a good way for you to do it. Scotland looked pretty comfortable at Murrayfield against Fiji, 57-17. They get up. Fiji without most of their European contingent, it must be said. Like they had 16 or 17 Drua players, Harry, in the 23. So it was a local team.
I had thought that the cohesion of their second line players would see them through. I thought it was a battle of depth. Both teams didn't have some of their top players, but it turns out that Scotland had plenty, and they were enterprising. They were attacking.
First half.
They out Fiji'd Fiji. However, I got to say this, and I never talk about bitch about refs and such, but it just seemed like a lot of headshots against Fijian players was not even looked at. And there's a compilation you can see online, and it's 4 or 5 of the worst king hits you've seen. And I don't know what's going on. I wonder if there's been some edict from on high to say, let's ease back a little bit. We've done enough, on the cross action, defense side to say we did something, but now we really need to not look at that so much because, I mean, they were obvious. They were like crown of the head to the chin kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if there's an edict, frankly. I also hope not. But I think it's interesting. I think the one, we'll maybe come back to that in a second. The interesting one that we noticed on Saturday at Twickenham was, the ball goes up in the air, the catcher's underneath the ball, and you're not allowed, obviously, to shepherd or to get in the way of the
access.
Access was Angus Gardner's key word.
It's making a biggish difference, actually.
It did.
And you get a clearer contest in the air, which is good. And I think that is clearly something that, that has emerged in recent times, and I think is hopefully making a bit of a difference because, as I say, those crowded skies and the people off balance and what have you, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, I can tell you this: the Springboks are salivating at that.
I can imagine. Yeah,
that would be right up their street, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. So Scotland this weekend have South Africa, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, righto.
Your fearless, intrepid music and other kind of reviewer critic Harry will be at the grounds in Murrayfield.
Of course he will. I walked into that.
Listen, Murrayfield is one of the great places to go see rugby. As you know, I've been to quite a few stadia in my life, and there's something about the proximity, Rob, to the field that I love. It's a proper rugby stadium made for rugby.
I've got a soft spot for certainly for it. And I was a student up in Edinburgh, and I remember the old Murrayfield. And you could see the hills in the background, and then the pipes start up, and it's always cold, and it was fantastic. I used to think so. I know I sound 108, but the enclosed stadium, you don't get that quite thing. But yeah, the atmosphere again there has improved a lot. I think in recent years they've done a lot of good work.
And a very cheeky DJ. The thing about the Scots is they're very quick on the puns, and so you got to really listen to the song and go, "Oh, I see what you're doing there."
Well, you see, if you're a musical expert, you see that'll be easy for you.
No, I do love the walk up to Murrayfield as well. It's set up on this kind of crown, and so you're rising into it. And then once you get in there, they have proper entertainment. I mean, their off times is like an actual rock band that's recognizable. I'm looking forward to that. But Rob, I'm interested in what you think England takes from this going forward. They tried to make 202 tackles. They fell off a few, but that's a hard way to make a living. Do they come into Australia a little bit battered, maybe a little bit down, or do they see it as, okay, now let's rectify that and bury somebody?
I think the latter is how they'll be selling it amongst each other. They're already saying, listen, we should have won that game. We didn't win it. There's all sorts of stuff, but we're at home. We're playing Australia now. We know Australia are improving from where they were at the end of the World Cup, but we're improving too. They have a genuine belief that, and there is really good team spirit. The players get on well. They've got good players in that squad, England. It's just knitting it all together, getting a little bit of consistency of what they're trying to do. And to be fair, to Steve Borthwick, that's exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to add layer on layer, do it gradually. I think the question, I think they will come good. They've got Marler's obviously disappearing. Dan Cole will be disappearing too. They've got to find some props, but there are props out there. And so I think if the question is how quickly they can make that transition, and it's easy for me to say, oh, well, I think they'll be really tough in 2031, that World Cup. But hang on a minute, that's a long way down the track, isn't it? You've got a lot of rugby before then, and I don't think you can. After a while, you can't think like that, can you? You've got to think, right, we're going to knock over the next team we see. It happens to be Australia. We are going to pile into Australia. And Australia, Joe Schmidt's a very smart guy. Everybody's got a lot of respect for Joe Schmidt. They know that he's sort of stiffened the Wallaby resolve since the World Cup. But I think they'll still be going, right, this is where we really give it a go.
Do you think we see the same England team that took on New Zealand, or does Steve Borthwick use this game as a chance to try a few other blokes, knowing that they've got South Africa in a fortnight?
No, I think he'll very much go. You might look at his bench, but it would surprise me, to be honest, if he didn't keep the same starting 15, pretty much, give or take the odd bump or bruise. I'm not quite sure, but the bench he might have a look at, because every game is different and you need different weapons and things. But he's not by inclination the man to throw it all up in the air and see where it lands. So I think he would be saying, right, guys, let's stick with it. I don't think he'll be trying to make them not, make Australia their World Cup final because they've got South Africa the following week. But I think he's after incremental, steady progress. And I think the only snag is that the supporters want something a bit quicker than that.
It's interesting. He is an incrementalist, and I almost divide coaches into those two main schools of thought. And I think he would come back. He always talks about being on a journey, but you got to build more than 69 rucks. So that was how many rucks that was built against New Zealand. When you go against the Wallabies, you're going into Fraser McWright, which is a problem, but also you've got to build more than that. You've got to be able to camp down in the 22, get some cards against the Wallabies, put it into the corner, and soak and actually not just soak up pressure, but apply pressure. Otherwise, Wallabies will hang around and hurt you. So do you think he can change a little bit on the attack side? Lineouts were beautiful, 12 of 12, low penalty count. A lot of things were good for England, but that's, you're playing against the Wallabies, who also know how to hang around, soak up, and hurt you.
Well, that's exactly right. I think what you mentioned there, the penalty count was massive. So England, they've gone big on that. Look, if we don't give away penalties, we basically keep sides out of our half. It's simple as that, isn't it? And they were successful at that with New Zealand. They were just, New Zealand had enough opportunities, or created enough opportunities, and countermanded that. I think, I think England need to do a little bit more, either whether it's, off the base. Benno is quite quick off the base, isn't he? They can create stuff there. Ollie Lawrence is playing well for club. It's just, there's still, it's very hard to pin down, but they do a little bit more. They just need to do a little bit more than the basics, than the keeping your sort of foot on somebody's chest is fine. But then you have to find a way to finish them off, don't you?
Yeah, and then coming around the base, like Maro Itoje picking and going. There were some meters there against all that. The same meters will be there against the Wallabies, but there's no offload. I mean, there were a few, but it just seems like that has to be added to the game.
No second phase.
Turning it around, how do the Wallabies beat England? What type of game plan would that look like?
Well, I'm interested to see how good they are in the air again these days, because I think most Aussie sides traditionally they've been good in the air, and there's a lot of space out on England's out in the flanks and the wings, with the blitz defense that they're using. So New Zealand tried to get out there, didn't always succeed, but you could see what they were trying to do. So I'd be looking at that. A lot's going to depend on their scrum now. If whoever they pick in the front row, scrummaging wise, if they can hold firm and maybe even get a bit of a nudge on, that's going to be massive. And then the breakdown. I mean, the breakdown is massive against England. If you can disrupt them there, it's sort of everything falls apart really for England. They can't really go anywhere else, because that's what it's all based around. So those three areas, I'd say.
And we saw, Harry, in Sydney, the effort and the lengths that Fraser Wright went to disrupt New Zealand. So they've got recency about this.
I mean, on his day, Fraser McWright's one of those great negation type flanks. Like your stats look great, and then you look at, well, why didn't we do anything? Well, because Fraser McWright was there, the Pocock.
That's it, because he hit 25 rucks himself.
I mean, I think so. It's interesting about the assistant coaching, Rob. That's the one thing I'm taking away. Like, that is true. It's even though Steve Borthwick's like a continuity kind of guy, it hasn't really played out that way. And especially on attack, players really like to have an attack coach that they can talk to and talk about what did I see and what can I do differently. And I don't think you go to Borthwick on that, do you?
No, you go to Richard Wigglesworth, who's his great mate and has been sort of retained. And Wigglesworth was a very good player. He could play scrum half, he could play fly half. He had a long career, played a lot of Premiership games as well. And so he's tactically he's excellent. Whether he, it's I think he's more of a strategist, in terms of the whole shape of the game. I don't know really. Again, it's hard to tell if you're not inside the camp all the time. Those tactical nuances, attacking nuances. They have actually. I mean, they got Andrew Strawbridge. I don't know if you know from New Zealand. Who is a great guy and is there sort of overseeing it all as a sort of mentor type. So he would be having a little bit of input, and he's been very close to some very good coaches in New Zealand over the years. So again, you're hoping it's like putting all the ingredients in the pot, and you're looking at it and you go, this isn't really cooking very fast, and maybe what do I need to put something else in, or it's not a perfect game that getting the right stew and the right mixture. But as I say, I think they really need a good result against Australia just to restore everybody's faith. They beat Ireland at the end of the Six Nations. Great game, drop goal to win, ironically, from Marcus Smith at the end of the game to win that match. And Twickenham was going mad, and it was all fantastic. And here we go, and since when, of course, they've lost 4 tests on the bounce. So they need a sign of some description to keep the faith.
I didn't ask you, Brett.
The hard part there is that Australia haven't won at Twickenham in
a long time.
A good while. It'll be 5 or 6 tests, I think, now.
Yeah.
Hey, Brett, I forgot to ask you about the stripe on England's jersey strip. Do you like that kind of?
I do. Yeah. I do actually. I mean, you can't do much with a white jersey, but I like it. The bit of red, bit of blue. Yeah, I did.
It's always good to meet a fashion correspondent. I know I'd not met one of those before, but it's
anytime you want to have jersey talk, Rob.
Brett can go in deep into jersey talk.
Go real deep.
No, it's I quite like it. As you say, you don't want to ruin the basic look of it, do you? But no, I didn't think too bad. I did think they were, I thought they were all wearing sort of, armbands for somebody keeled over, unfortunately, or whatever at one point. But I think that was just my eyesight.
I get it.
Yeah, could well be. The other big game, I think this weekend, Ireland, New Zealand, in Dublin on Friday night. That's going to be a ripping game to kick off the weekend, isn't it?
Well, it'll be a ripping night out as well, I have to say. I think. Well, it'd be fascinating, won't it? You'll discover how good New Zealand are, and I think again, Beauden Barrett's not available. Cody Taylor isn't available after
correct
bangs at the weekend. So those are 2 big losses, I would say, for New Zealand. And I would say Ireland would be absolutely up for it, big time.
I almost think they're going to miss Cody more than Beauden, if that sounds heretical. But Cody Taylor has been really, really good. And the fact that he went out early in that match actually, I think, was part of the tale that was told at Twickenham. But he's been dynamic. I think Razor Robertson, he doesn't do this very often. He said Cody's one of the top 2 or 3 hookers in the world. I mean, he doesn't usually rate his own players that way. But everyone's missing players, so, Ireland's missing a hooker as well. So I do think it's going to be one of those, properly hyped up matches. Do you think that, hype, bitterness, whatever, is that real, or is that a bit of a show?
Ireland love a bit of that. I think they like a bit of, they could players, don't get me wrong, but I think that extra edge. I had a chance to sit down with Caelan Doris a few weeks ago. Again, a very impressive guy. who I think will be pretty close to the Lions captaincy in Australia next summer potentially. And you know, there's a as you might expect, there's a bit of a steely side to him as well as everything else. And I think, if you look around that Irish team, I think there's some big match players in there. Put it that way. They used with Leinster to they don't bother playing against the small games and the URC. They save themselves for these big games, and I think they probably, certainly at home, they rise to these occasions. Away, occasionally they can get ambushed, but at home, I think they're going to be tough to beat.
They'll be wanting to start their campaign on a high, and it doesn't get much higher than beating New Zealand at home. That's going to be great.
No,
I'm surprised you're not going to Dublin, Harry.
Yeah, and Brad, I know you know this. The relationship in Australian rugby and New Zealand rugby is similar in one sense. I think New Zealand looks at Ireland a bit like New Zealand's the big dog, and it's been around for a while, and then there's this new yappy dog that they want to. I think they want to put their paw down and just get him down, and so I think it's definitely real. There's no artifice or posturing from New Zealand side. I think they want this match, and I think they've been thinking about this match for a while. And it's funny because they won the quarterfinal, but I still think there's a part of them that doesn't feel like Ireland is treating them with the proper respect. And we'll see what happens.
I've got a question for you. Who beats Ireland in Friday night in the Aviva Stadium in Dublin? Which side in the world beats them? And I don't think. France, I think, that's a tough place to go in the daylight when it's lovely and what have you.
Friday night
under with a crowd going bonkers. I don't know. I think they're a very, very tough side to beat.
With the correct TMO, with the guy with a name like Van der Westhuizen, I think the Boks take them.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see. I think that's the game perhaps that we might want to see.
Yeah, no, we will, and we'll be taking a close look at it. Rob, it's been a fantastic chat. I guess the big question coming out of this now and thinking about Ireland, New Zealand is how many papers are going to run a late Johnny Sexton excerpt just to fire things up this week. Is he penciling that in for the Guardian this week?
Well, it's I wrote a piece the other day. It's a good book if you get your hands on it. It's as you might expect. He's got an unbelievable memory. I don't think he forgets. I don't think he forgets. If somebody was rude to him 15 years ago, it's in. It's still in here. But no, there's been a lot of coverage on that. I think I don't know about this week. I think actually they'll be harking back to that quarter final, won't they? I can feel Rico Ione might get a little bit of heat given their spat with
Rico won't want to make too many mistakes this Friday night. There's no question about that.
The thing about Rico is he doesn't care though.
No, that's true.
and won't he celebrate if he scores a try there? He won't care.
He definitely will.
It'll be a great game, and Geordie Barrett obviously is going to join Leinster after the tour, so he's
already pulling points, I see.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
There was a photo of him just yesterday, just like a Sunday afternoon. He's pulling pints already in Dublin, getting ready for it. So
you've got to make yourself feel at home, as soon as you can.
It's getting ready for the locals. Exactly. Rob, it's been great to catch up with you again. We always enjoy having you on for a chat and to go over these things. Thanks so much for giving us some time.
Absolute pleasure, and good luck to everybody this weekend.
Cheers, Rob.
Cheers.
This is the 8-9 combo. Brett McKay. This is Harry Jones, and mate, wonderful to have Rob Kitson and hand out an 8-9 debut for him. Fantastic catch up with him again.
A bold man will rule the world, and I just thought it was great that 2/3 of us are clean pated. Rob knows a lot of things about a lot of themes, and he's just always up to date, and I love that. I also like that he actually will share some anecdotes about players. So many journalists will go, nope, I'm not going to talk any about that person. Yeah,
great. And I love. I don't read his stuff all the time, but I love finding something that he read that he wrote. Even just a couple of days later.
It's
just
it's
always
really
nice.
good. I mean, first of all, he's a good writer, which is my first prerequisite. I don't care how great the theme is.
I'm going to find this
You've
music
got
review.
to write it well, because I don't want to read it if it's not written well. He writes well, but also he doesn't just do what everyone else is doing. Like, you can tell he sits down at his laptop or his typewriter or whatever.
What's the different way I can do
writes,
this? Yeah, exactly.
and he puts down what he thinks.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and we will absolutely find his music review of The Guardian. We'll post that on the 8-9 socials as well. I'm sure it'll be fantastic. From other scores from around the weekend, mate, an All Black 15 beat Munster 38-24 in Limerick. I have to admit, I've seen nothing more than about 90 seconds worth of highlights.
I've seen none.
Oh, you haven't even seen that much? Okay.
No.
Looks pretty comfortable.
I've literally watched England, New Zealand on fast forward again because it was such an interesting match. I love Clash of Styles in boxing, in tennis.
Yeah.
I love Clash of Styles, which is why it's really important to me that we keep different ways to play the game and not, try to funnel it into one way, because I thought it was fascinating that it was 22-24 with a game on the line and a kick to settle it. With the stats being all over the place, they played differently, and I thought that was cool to watch.
It was good to go back on Sunday afternoon as I did and just pop those couple of little still shots up and just those the moments that you didn't seem matter but do matter. That felt that are now bigger than they felt at the time, and the implications at the moment. And you think about Caleb Clark's wasn't a yellow card, the deliberate knockdown, but that was the penalty that allowed England to get out by 8, and
right.
It was
and you
really
were
cool.
And you were spot on how you diagnosed that the ruck that led to the drop goal attempt. And it's interesting because if they went one less time, it'd been better, or if they went one more time, it'd been better. They literally picked the one ruck that was the shakiest, with the least guards, and if they just done one more, like give it to Dom Brandt just holds it up. You get New Zealand was not going to jackal at that moment in time. They weren't going to give you an easy shot.
And then just that difference between that extra carry and the pass to George Ford was
one too many, and then one too less as well. Because then if they had one more settler, then Randall would have made sure he knew where Ford was and gun it to him.
Exactly right. So no, it was. So
everyone go on that chain of events that Brett's got, because it's actually a really good diagnosis, and it'll bring you back to the game. And what I think about rugby is so great is there's so much more to discuss post match than in most other sports.
Yeah, absolutely. It was round 8 of the top 14, mate. I think the couple of little scores that sort of stood out to me, Bordeaux have kept hold of second place despite going down 32-27 to Clermont. La Rochelle are back to third after their 17-point win over Stade Francais. Bayonne are now fourth after beating Toulouse 12-8 on Sunday.
Bayonne.
So there's 4 teams with 6 wins, 4 teams with 5 wins at the moment. So she's getting tight. We will be back with games of the week later in the week to cover off an even bigger weekend of Test footy coming. And don't forget as well, we'll have Test match post-mortem after England-Australia on Saturday evening UK time, and we'll cover off Ireland and New Zealand in that as well. So make sure you're all subscribed and following as needed wherever you need to, so you don't miss that. Headline the last 7 days, mate. One that caught my eye late last week: rugby needs a football-like transfer system, according to South African Rugby Union Chief Executive Riaan Oberholzer. I like the concept. I don't know how it would work in practice, but I like the idea, and I like that I think it's worth discussing.
Yeah, I'm gonna say
his point
exactly
being that so many South African players go overseas that the provinces ultimately get nothing for their development. I'm like you. I like the concept. It's a debate worth having. I haven't heard anything that makes me think, oh yeah, that's it. Well, that's how to handle it. And I also think there's so many differences between rugby and football, which is where it's mostly compared to. Yeah. But that is certainly the blueprint. And his argument being that, if Racing want Owen Farrell or Sia Khaleesi, something like that, then you can buy him out of his current contract, but it's going to cost you some money. or it's going to cost you some money either way. And so yeah, I think there's a discussion there, and I can imagine that the Sanzar partners would be quickly on board for that sort of thing if it gets to that point of being lobbied like that.
That's where the direction of the talent is flowing from south to north. Yeah,
exactly my point. Got a final thought for the week?
Well, I think this coming weekend, not just because I'm going to be there in the Aviva in Murrayfield. Actually, I shouldn't say.
Are you doing both?
Are
you doing both?
Yeah, that's the whole plan. Because what's happened is the Irish have set it up for Friday night. It's an hour flight to Edinburgh. Yeah. And we play on Sunday. So that's it. Like I have all of Saturday to get over there. It's easy.
And then you're going to hang around in Edinburgh for are you seeing Scotland, Australia in 2 weeks' time?
No. I'm going to go back to London. I've got some work I'm going to do in London, so it's actually perfect. And I'm flying from the northeast coast, and it's interesting. People say, "Oh, horrible travel schedule." From Boston to Dublin is quicker than from Boston to LA. Like Boston is literally closer to Ireland than it is to California.
Yeah,
so it's very easy flights for me, and no, I'm looking forward to it. I think this weekend.
So this is a convenience thing for you, is it?
Maybe, sure. I'm a man of the people, particular sector of people. So listen, Australia, England is the rugby ashes, delightful.
Right.
This grudge match between Ireland and New Zealand, I've got to be there to see it. I want to be amongst the Irish in their angst and in their triumph or their joy. And then I want to go over and just bury the Scots. And listen, there's no place, like I said, there's no place on earth that's better for a rugby weekend than Edinburgh. But if there was a candidate, it might be Dublin.
Yeah, righto. No, you've picked a good weekend. Fair enough. Enjoy. We'll work out some timings later in the week. A quick reminder that Jeff Parks' book, A Year in the Life and Death of the Melbourne Rebels, is out now and is available to order in paperback and ebook via all the major booksellers, Amazon, Kobo, Booktopia, all of those ones as well. So, and Harry had an excellent review on The Roar last week as well. So go and check that out. But that is episode 39 of the 8-9 Combo done. Go and check the show notes for links to the 8-9 Combo on Twitter and YouTube. Leave us a rating or a review wherever you can, and turn notifications and auto download and all that sort of stuff on as well. Harry and I remain on the socials in our usual places, and you'll find links on our socials and in the show notes as well for Harry's written work on The Roar a couple of times a month, and my weekly Australian columns on RugbyPass, which will be back next week. This is the 8-9 Combo, the short side set piece combination you didn't realize you needed, coming from the podcast double act you already had. I'm Brett McKay. He's Harry Jones. Don't forget, another test match postmortem coming your way this weekend, and we're back in your ears in just a few days' time with another Northern Spring Autumn Series Tour edition of Games of the Week.
Come play with us.
Yeah, our budget's gone again.